Welcome to The Explainer. We're diving deep into the Chernobyl disaster today. But look, this isn't just about a reactor that exploded. No, this is really a story about a system that was basically designed to fail. It was a system built on a foundation of secrecy and lies, and the consequences, they were absolutely catastrophic.
That right there, that was the fate waiting for three men on what started as just a totally ordinary night. They were sent into the rubble of reactor number 4 to figure out what was going on, a mission that, well, it sealed their fate. To really get how it came to this, we've got to go back to the start of that shift.
So, let's start with an engineer named Alexander Yuvchenko. He's clocking in for a night shift. He leaves his wife, Natasha, and their little 2-year-old son sleeping at home, and he has absolutely no idea he's about to walk straight into a historical catastrophe. The mood's actually pretty good. The May Day holiday's right around the corner.
And this is what everyone was being told. This was the official line on TV, the thing that calmed the fears of people like Yuvchenko's wife. It was this promise of absolute, unquestionable safety, a promise that would become just horrifically ironic in a matter of hours.
You know, the stage for this whole disaster was set long before that night. It was rooted in the very design of the reactor itself, the RBMK. This thing was a uniquely Soviet machine, built with all these cost-cutting measures and, more importantly, dangerous secrets that were hidden even from the people who were running it. And it all kicked off with a so-called safety test.
So, what was the actual trigger for the explosion? It was this thing they called a safety test. And the goal, believe it or not, was to see if the plant could handle a total power failure. You know, a scenario where the connection to the main electrical grid is just gone.
Okay, so here was the big problem. This really dangerous 75-second gap. If the power went out, the backup diesel generators needed over a minute to kick in and get the cooling pumps running again. This test was supposed to see if the turbines, as they were slowing down, could generate enough power to bridge that gap. But here's the thing, it had already failed 3 times in previous years, and the pressure from Moscow to just get it done was huge.
Now, to get what went so horribly wrong, you gotta understand the basics of how a reactor works. At its core, it's all about controlling a chain reaction. You have neutrons that split uranium atoms, that releases a ton of heat, that heat turns water into steam, the steam spins turbines, and boom, you get electricity. The key word in all of that is control.
And right here, this is the critical design flaw, the secret they kept from the operators. You see, the control rods were supposed to be the brakes. They're made of boron, and you insert them to absorb neutrons and slow the whole reaction down. But at Chernobyl, the tips of these rods were made of graphite. And graphite does the exact opposite. It speeds the reaction up. So the very tool designed to shut the reactor down would actually act like a gas pedal for a few critical seconds. It's insane.
So you've got this unprepared night crew, a reactor that's already in an unstable state, and this immense pressure from this arrogant shift supervisor, Anatoly Dyatlov, to just get the test done. It was a recipe for disaster. And at one point, a totally confused operator calls for instructions and gets this chilling response: follow the crossed-out instructions.
As the reactor just went completely wild, the operators did the only thing they thought they could do. They slammed the emergency shutdown button. But as those control rods started lowering, their graphite tips caused an immediate, catastrophic power surge. One guy in the reactor hall actually saw the 350-kilogram caps on the fuel channels jumping up and down just seconds before the entire reactor blew itself to pieces.
The force of that explosion, it's just unimaginable. We're talking about a 10,000-ton steel and concrete lid that weighs as much as 2,000 elephants, and it was blown straight through the roof, exposing the burning radioactive core to the open air.
In the immediate aftermath, the most dangerous thing wasn't just the radiation, it was the absolute disbelief and denial from the people in charge. The entire system was just not built to even comprehend a disaster on this scale.
This was the first report out of the control room, a completely fatal misjudgment that basically dictated the chaotic response that followed. Dyatlov and others, they just refused to believe the unbelievable. To them, RBMK reactors could not explode. End of story.
But outside, guys like Alexander Yuvchenko, they saw the terrifying truth. He described seeing this beautiful, almost iridescent beam of light shooting up into the night sky from what was left of the reactor hall. A more experienced colleague literally grabbed him and pulled him away, and probably saved his life right then and there.
This Soviet obsession with secrecy and control, it turned deadly. Firefighters showed up thinking it was a simple roof fire and started kicking pieces of radioactive graphite with their boots. phone lines to the nearby city of Pripyat were cut. And for 36 hours, as this radioactive cloud just billowed into the sky, the city's 49,000 residents were told absolutely nothing.
Now, in the decades since, the story of Chernobyl has gotten really clouded by myths and dramatizations. So it's super important to separate the fiction from the heartbreaking and often way more complex reality.
So let's debunk a few things you might have heard. That bridge of death with crowds watching the fire? It's a popular story, but it's a fabrication. Most people were asleep. What about the heroic suicide squad that drained the water? They knew the risks, but they all survived the mission and lived on for years. And the naked miners? Nope. Conditions were unbelievably horrible, but they weren't naked. The real truth is already tragic enough. It doesn't need these embellishments.
You know, in secret tapes he recorded just before he died, the chief investigator, Valery Legasov, he didn't blame just a few operators. He blamed a rotten, secretive system that cared more about appearances than it did about safety. It was a chain of failure where pretty much every single link was a lie.
The legacy of Chernobyl isn't just about a failed reactor. It's a permanent radioactive warning sign for all of us. It shows us what happens when lies are valued more than lives, when the truth is seen as a bigger threat than the disaster itself. The fallout from that one night wasn't just nuclear, it was political, and it helped expose the cracks that would eventually bring down an entire empire.